Hey there, my name is Krystal Everdeen, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet this circle pattern, or this mandala pattern. I'm not sure what to call it, but I'm going to teach you how to crochet it, so let's get started. For this project, I'm using size 4 yarn from the brand Impeccable, as well as a size 5mm hook. And the first step to creating this crochet mandala, or crochet circle pattern, is to, of course, make a slip knot, and then you're going to chain 4, 2, 3, 4, and then you're going to go into that very first chain that you made and just slip stitch through it. So going into the very first stitch here, and then yarn over, and then go through both loops. Now you're left with this little ball, or rather it's a circle, but you kind of have to pull it apart to see where the center is. And once you find that center, you're actually going to crochet into it using a double crochet. And a double crochet, I kind of got ahead of myself here, but I'll show you again. Hold on. Okay, so a double crochet is yarn over through the same little opening in the circle, yarn over, back through the little opening in the circle, yarn over through 2 loops, and yarn over through the last 2 loops. And that's what a double crochet is. Yay, now you're going to make like 7 more. Alright, so yarn over through the opening, yarn over back through the opening, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through the last 2 loops. And that's what a double crochet is. And to be honest, while I was crocheting this, I wasn't paying attention to how many I was making on this circle. I had intended to make 8 or 10, but I ended up making 9, which is really annoying because now that I was editing this and I counted how many I made, I was like, come on, why couldn't it land on an even number? But I was just making as many as it took to fill in the circle, and you could do the same. The number really doesn't matter. It could be 8, 9, or 10, and I'm sure it's still gonna look great. Although I would prefer to say go for making 10 double crochets in this little circle, so it can be nice and even. And yes, so once you finish this first row of the circle, then you're going to slip stitch into the very first stitch you made for the row, and then that completes the first row. And that's how you're going to end every single row from now on, no matter what stitch you make. For the very last stitch of the row, you're going to slip stitch into the first stitch. So yeah, so for this second row, you're going to chain 2 and then go into the previous row's double crochet and make an extended double crochet. Now, if you've been on my channel for a while, I've actually been calling this a triple crochet, but apparently that's been wrong, and I want to thank you guys for letting me know that it's actually called an extended double crochet. And you're going to make 2 of those per stitch. So this is 1 extended double crochet, and if you're not familiar with extended double crochet, I'll show you how to make the second one in the same stitch. Yarn over through the stitch, yarn over back through the stitch, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, and yarn over through the last 2 loops. And again, that's going to be 2 per stitch. So yarn over through the stitch, yarn over back through the stitch, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through the last 2 loops. Now I'm going to make my second one in the same stitch, yarn over through the stitch, yarn over back through the stitch, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, and yarn over through the last 2 loops. Yay, and that's what the project should look like so far. So again, the extended double crochet, the only difference between that and the regular double crochet is that 1 chain at the very beginning. So this is all normal, but then this part right here, boom, that's the difference. And then you go through 2 loops and then through the last 2 loops. But if you're a complete beginner to crochet, I will have the link to my Crocheting for Beginners video in the description box below, as well as the link to my blog post where I have the written pattern / diagram pattern for this project. So yeah. So once you reach the very end of the row and you slip stitch into the very first stitch you made for this second row, then you're done with this row, and now it's time to move on to row number 3. And for the third row, I decided to make yet another row of extended double crochet, but it's going to be a little bit different this time. So chain 2, yarn over, go through the very first stitch, yarn over, go through the stitch again, yarn over through one loop, yarn over through two loops, and yarn over through the last two loops. So you're going to do that, that's normal, but then you're going to chain one and then go into the next stitch. So you're only going to make one of these per stitch, but you're going to add that chain one in between. And what that's going to do is that's going to open up the stitch and make it look like a different stitch as opposed to the one that you made in the second row. So it's not like a repeat. So again, extended double crochet, then chain one, then go into the next stitch and create another extended double crochet, and then chain one, and so on and so forth. Extended double crochet inside of the next stitch, and yeah, you could totally see the difference between the two, where the other one's more crowded and closed, where this one's way more open, and that's what I wanted. I want a variation of stitches every single row. So although this is technically the same stitch, because we're doing it differently and adding that chain in between, it looks like a different one, and I'm quite proud of it. So as always, you're going to finish up the row, and once you have reached the very last stitch and made your very last extended double crochet, then you're going to slip stitch into the very first stitch that you made for the third row to complete the third row. So here I am making my very last extended double crochet, and then I'm going to go into the very first extended double crochet that I made for the row, and I'm going to slip stitch into it, and that completes row number 3, and the project looks like this so far. So if your project looks like this so far, then you're doing a fantastic job, and time to move on to row number 4. And for row number 4, I was thinking, okay, how am I going to make something look different for this row? So I decided to make some more extended double crochets. I know, I wonder what my favorite crochet stitch is. Obviously the extended double crochets. Okay, so but this time for this row I'm going to make 2 extended double crochets per opening, and what that's going to create is like a little V, because the openings are larger than the ones that we did in row number 2, and I think it looks kind of cool. Yeah, and if you didn't guess by now, I'm actually just making it up as I go along. I was creating this circle mandala, and I was just going row by row and trying to figure out what looks cool, and this is what I came up with. So again, you're going to be making 2 extended double crochets per opening, so every time you reach the opening of an extended double crochet of the previous row, then you're going to go into that opening and make an extended double crochet, and then go ahead and make another extended double crochet inside of this same opening, and then you're left with these little V's. They're so cute. So yeah, make sure you do not chain one in between any of the extended double crochets that you make in this entire row, because then it'll probably look too much like row number 3. And my whole goal for this was not to repeat stitches back to back, and to have different stitches per row. Well, I guess technically I'm using the same stitch like 3 times in a row, but in a variety of ways so that they look different. So anyway, I'm completing my row number 4 here. This is my last extended double crochet inside of that opening. Oh, never mind, one more inside of that tiny opening, and then I'm going to complete the row by slip stitching into the very first extended double crochet I made for row number 4. And now that's nice and complete, and this is what the project looks like so far. Woohoo! Alright, on to row number 5. And for this row, I decided to keep it simple and go for a single crochet. And if you are not familiar with a single crochet is through the stitch, yarn over, back through the stitch, yarn over, and back through 2 loops. The single crochet is probably one of the easiest stitches that you can make. But again, if you are a complete beginner and somehow made it to this point in the video, then you could still watch the Crocheting for Beginners video just to get a refresher and practice for a bit, then come back to this video. Although again, if you've made it this far, you probably already know what a single crochet is, or you can just figure it out because you already know how to make the extended double crochets. You're like, psh, single crochet sounds super easy, and it is. So yeah, you're going to make 2 single crochets per stitch. So every time you reach the opening of an extended double crochet in the previous row, you're going to make 2 single crochets inside of that stitch. And once you've completed the entire row, then you're going to slip stitch into the very first single crochet that you made for that row, and boom, you're done with row number 5. Now on to row number 6. So chain 2 and then go into the very first single crochet stitch that you made for row number 5, and you're going to make a double crochet, which a double crochet is yarn over through the stitch, yarn over back through the stitch, yarn over through 2 loops, and yarn over through the last 2 loops. Again, it is the easier version of the extended double crochet where you have to chain 1 at the beginning, but this time you just go through 2 loops and then go through 2 loops again, and that's a double crochet. So every single crochet that you come across, you're going to make a double crochet inside of it, and that is a lot of double crochets. And if you're wondering how come you have to make more stitches per row, aka like making 2 single crochets per 1 stitch of the previous row, well, that is because every row that you make is actually getting larger and larger because you want the circle to get larger and larger. If you continuously make the same number of stitches per row, then your circle is going to curve in, and it's going to be more of a cylinder than a circle. So that's why you need to be making more and more stitches per row. So that's what I'm doing. But the thing is, you have to be careful because if you make too many stitches per row, then your project starts ruffling, and you don't want that either. You want a flat circle. So after you're done with row number 6 and you've created all those double crochets inside of every single crochet from row number 5, then you're going to slip stitch into the very first stitch that you made for row number 6 and complete that row as well. And this is what the project looks like so far. I really like it, but it needs to be a little bit bigger for the project that I want to use it for, which I wonder if you can guess what it is. I'm pretty sure you can. It's a really easy guess, but I'm excited because I'm going to use this circle pattern / mandala for another tutorial, and that's going to come out later on. And once it is out, I will link it in the description box below. So anyway, for row number 7, you're going to go back to the extended double crochets, but this time you're going to chain 1 in between and go into every single double crochet from the previous row. So make sure you do not skip any of the extended double crochets from the previous row. You're going to go into all of them, but you're still going to chain 1 in between each of the stitches that you're making for row number 7. So again, row number 7 is extended double crochet, chain 1, and then extended double crochet inside of every single stitch. Make sure you do not double up inside of every stitch, because then you'll be making too many stitches, and again, you're going to start seeing the ruffled project. If you do come across that issue where your project does start to ruffle, just decrease the number of stitches that you're making per row, and then that should help. Well, I should say you need to unravel a couple of rows, or at least the very last row that's making it ruffle, and then decrease the number of stitches per row, or for that row. So yeah, once you've completed row number 7, then you slip stitch into the very first stitch that you made for that row, and the project should look something like this. So for row number 8, we're going to go back to the single crochets. However, you're going to alternate how many you're going to make per stitch. So you're going to start off with 1 single crochet, and then you're going to move on to the next stitch, and you're going to make 2 single crochets, and then again 1 single crochet, and then 2 single crochets inside of the same stitch, then 1 single crochet and 2 single crochets inside of 1 stitch, and 1 single crochet and 2 single crochets inside of 1 stitch. And the reason I decided to alternate was because I was starting to see that my project was beginning to ruffle a little bit, so I didn't want to add too many stitches to this row, so that's why I needed to alternate, because if I made 2 single crochets per stitch, that would have been too many stitches for that row, and that would have made my project ruffle. However, if I only made 1 single crochet per stitch, that would have been far too less, so my project would have curled up. So alternating between 1 and 2 stitches per opening was the perfect balance. So yeah, once I completed row number 8, it was time for row number 9, which is the loop row. So we're going to start making loops. So for the very first stitch, we're going to chain 4 and then skip a stitch and then slip stitch into the second stitch, and that created our first loop. Now you're going to chain 4 again and then slip stitch into the following stitch, and then chain 4 and then skip a stitch and then slip stitch into the following stitch, and then chain 4 and then slip stitch into the following stitch. Woo! And then chain 4 and then skip a stitch and then slip stitch into the following stitch, and then chain 4, skip a stitch and then slip stitch into the following stitch. And this is what the project should look like so far. So these are little loops. That's why it's the little loop row. So that's all you're going to do. You're going to chain 4, skip a stitch, and then slip stitch into the following stitch. Chain 4, 3, 4, and then skip a stitch and slip stitch into the following stitch. You're just going to do that for the entire row, and it feels weird that you're actually skipping a stitch for making a circle, because I just told you that you need to be making more and more stitches per row, but because you're making such a big stitch, which is the loop, are loops considered stitches? I'm just going to consider them stitches for now. That stretches across so far. It's fine to skip a stitch because it kind of makes up for it, because normally the regular stitches aren't as big, but these are. So I mean, I didn't have a problem with them. And then I ended the row with just slip stitching into the last stitch as I normally would to complete the final loop. And I actually really like the way that it turned out. I think it looks really cute like this. However, for my project purposes, I can't end it with just loops like this. It needs to be a little bit bigger, so we're going to continue with a couple more rows. So from here, you're going to make some more extended double crochets, and just every time you reach an opening for the loops of the previous row, you're going to make an extended double crochet, and then you're going to chain 1 and then make another extended double crochet, and then chain 1 and then make another extended double crochet, and then chain 1 and then make another extended double crochet. And yeah, you're going to do that for the entire row. And yeah, that's it. It's pretty easy. So row number 10, I believe, is going to be extended double crochet followed by 1 chain, and then you go into the next loop and make another extended double crochet, then chain 1, then another extended double crochet, then chain 1, then another extended another extended double crochet. Does anyone else hate when that happens, when the yarn like falls off your hook and you're like, ah, and then messes up your rhythm? I hate it so much. It's so annoying. So yeah, this is what row number 10 should look like. Woohoo! Now I'm going to finish up the row by slip stitching into the very first stitch that I made for row number 10, and now I'm done. Now for row number 11, and row number 11 it's just more single crochets inside of every stitch. So inside of every stitch this time you're actually going to make 3 single crochets inside of every extended double crochet that you made in the previous row. So every time you reach an opening, you're going to make 3 single crochets inside of that opening. So 1 single crochet, 2 single crochet, 3 single crochets, and then move on to the next opening. 1, 2, 3, and that's what it should look like so far. And I wanted to make this row of single crochet because for row number 12 I'm going to make scallops, and it's easiest to make scallops on top of a solid stitch like a single crochet, at least for me. So I'm going to complete this row with a slip stitch, and I'm done with row number 11. Now on to the 12th and final row, which is scallops. And to make scallops, I chain 1 and then I skip a stitch and go into the second stitch, and then I create 5 extended double crochets inside of 1 stitch. So inside of that 1 stitch, you're going to make a total of 5 extended double crochets. And I chose 5, but I think anywhere from 5 to 8 extended double crochets for a scallop should look nice. I wanted mine to be fairly small, so that's why I chose 5 extended double crochets per stitch for a scallop. But if you want them to be a little bit bigger, you can go up to 8 extended double crochets per scallop, and I think it'll still look fine. So it's totally up to you. For me, I'm doing 5. So once you have completed 5 extended double crochets and created your scallop, you're going to skip a stitch and then slip stitch into the next stitch and then create another scallop. So I just slip stitched right now. Then I'm going to create my next scallop by going into the following stitch and creating another 5 extended double crochets inside of this 1 stitch. Oh, another thing you could do is if you want these scallops more spaced out, you could just slip stitch into another stitch and then create another scallop. But for me, I'm just slip stitching right here and then into the very next stitch I'm making my next scallop, and that's why my scallops are so close together. But if you want yours to have a bigger gap in between them, then you just make more space by slip stitching into more stitches, and then they won't be so close to one another. But since I want my scallops to be pretty close to one another, that's why I make my next scallop really close to my previous scallop by just going into the very next stitch and creating the scallop. So yeah, totally up to you. This is your project. You can do whatever you want. This is more of a guideline. It doesn't have to be exactly like mine, so you don't have to be frustrated or anything. So I just finished up my last scallop and I slip stitched into the very last stitch to complete the row, and now I'm done with the project. And as I said before, I was just making everything up as I went along, and I wanted to make something about this size. However, if you want to use this and you want to make a bigger project, you could just keep going and going with the rows. You could just repeat the rows over and over again and make like a giant rug or something. So I really like that this is customizable. You can do whatever you want. You can make it as big or small as you want, and I hope you have a lot of fun doing it. Also, again, the project that I'm going to use this pattern for will be linked in the description box below once it's up, so that's really exciting. But also I have a lot of other crochet videos if you're interested, so you can go ahead and check those out as well. Thank you very much for watching. If you found this video helpful, entertaining, or interesting, please give it a big thumbs up and also click that red subscribe button if you have not already, so I can see you next time. Bye!